Good morning and welcome to life in a new era. The return of the shock jock. We're back. The old dinosaurs have crawled out of the La Brea tar pits of history and have made their return to real media. That is a frightening thing I'm looking at right now.
I'm sorry.
We are not designed for the close-up.
I had to move the camera.
We weren't built that. We just were not built that way. We are.
I don't get a view.
And that, honestly, that's kind of the topic of today's show, at least the start of it. The return of the people who were not built for the video age. Welcome to the program. It's the Steel Toe Morning Show. I'm Aaron Imholt. Johnny is here today. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am excited as all hell about today's show.
The prep sheet was awfully interesting.
I've added to that. There's so much more. Anthony Cumia made his return to broadcast radio, and let me be the first to say, on any program, since I'm the kind of the first one to come on. We're the morning guy. This is why you got to do a morning show. You know, all these people, Anthony talked about this on his show, how these podcast people are fucking terrible. I had one of our radio people tell me about Anthony coming back. They said, well, this is good for us.
Mm-hmm.
He said to me, he goes, this guy's got a worse record than you do. I said, it's always nice. When somebody,
not a competition.
It's always nice when somebody who's a bigger piece of shit on paper than you are gets a radio gig. That's always nice. But I mean, they do think that way. Yeah. I mean, they do think that way. They go like, if a guy like that, who's done the things he has done on and off the air, can get back on, I guess we have nothing to worry about. That's kind of their attitude towards the whole thing. Is you know what? It's always nice when someone else does something and someone looks back at you after looking at them and goes, you're not so bad.
Right? It's like one of those depressing, uplifting things. Like, hey, don't worry, you have a shot. ESPN just hired Michael Vick. Oh, yeah. Fuck. So it's like, Right. You're just a guy, like you're a wide receiver who got caught like kicking his cat. Right. And everyone like canceled you. Like there was a big Twitter mob or something. And then all of a sudden, Mike Vick will now be the lead analyst for FS1. And you're like, oh, shit. I think realize what he did, right? Like,
damn. You were always afraid.
There's hope for me.
You were always afraid to dip your toe in the water, thinking you would burn your foot off. And then somebody else dips it in and they jump right in and it's cool. And you're like, oh, shit, I didn't know. Here we go. But Anthony, no, in all seriousness, Anthony returned to broadcast radio. He did a Sunday night show on WABC, AM 770, I believe, in New York City. It was funny because SP and I listened to it, and we tuned in beforehand, and this was kind of funny. The show before him is Sunday Sinatra, where they play kind of AM 1010 here in St. Cloud. They play like the old Sinatra Rat Pack stuff, those old standards or whatever they call them. And it's hosted by the one and only Joe Piscopo. Saturday Night Live Zone from the early 1980s. Joe Piscopo is hosting Bulliva's. It's sponsored by Bulliva's Sunday Sinatra. And then it goes from Piscopo into Anthony, which oddly is like fitting. Like that fits. Like it's kind of a throwback vibe, if you will.
So you're saying we go from old to old. I get you.
Yeah. And Anthony was on there and he came on. And immediately the first thing I said to SP is I looked over at her and I said, he belongs on radio. Kind of like us. Like, he even mentioned it. He goes, doing the internet show, and this is what people who have never done a real show before don't understand, is we've always said, we're in exile.
Right.
Like, this is not where we want to be. This is not where we should be, whatever. We're doing a show. We're keeping our face out there. We're keeping our voice out there until that opportunity comes, knowing that in that industry, opportunity comes very rarely. I mean, Anthony Cumia was one of the biggest stars in radio. one of the biggest. I mean, one of the few guys left who could draw a crowd, and that's why he's back. There are so few stars in the broadcasting business now that when you need something, and radio does need something, radio had it no competition for too long. Like even in the 2000s when podcasts were just starting out, they were never a threat.
What was the first thing that was kind of supposed to be a threat, but then turned out not to be? It was like satellite radio or whatever. It was like, radio is going to end with satellite radio. And then that pretty much went just straight to truckers, and everyone else went,
satellite's going to die before terrestrial radio does. I mean, satellite's got nothing left. So that didn't work. And then you had there were 5 podcasts that drew a dime. You had Corolla, Marin, Rogan, and some of the NPR. Well, NPR's regular radio, so you can't even really count those podcasts because that's an offshoot of regular radio. So you had 5 shows that made money. And then with super chats and stuff like that and, direct fan funding, that kind of became the podcast model and still is the podcast model. I have always said, if you can get someone else to pay the bills for you, and all you do is show up and do a show, that's the preferable way to do it.
Certainly the most stress-free for doing the show.
It's the most stress-free for doing the show. They take care of all that stuff. You just show up and do your dumb little show. That's it. JMB says, how many people still listen to FM or even satellite? People who live exclusively on the internet hate hearing this, but it's over 90% of people listen to radio at least once a week. At least once a week.
I'm definitely in the 10 then, because I get pissed whenever it comes on in the car. No, I want to use my phone for my own music, damn it.
I'll listen to sports talk stuff from time to time. It's hard to get good, Minnesota sports talk stuff nationally. They don't really give a shit about us. So I'll listen to sports talk once in a while, sometimes some news talk. But yeah, music,
And that's the other thing. Radio relied on drive time like music. Now it doesn't have that.
Yeah, radio's had a hard time adjusting because in the era of the shock jock, radio cut all those guys out because they were really expensive. Those personalities got really expensive. They were drawing a lot of ad revenue. Well, then the counter to that was all the people who would call the sponsors and call the FCC. And all of a sudden, the ad revenue they were drawing versus the fines and the threats they were facing started to balance out. So radio started to move away from that. You had Bubba killing a pig in a parking lot. You had all the Howard Stern fines. You had Opie and Anthony with the sex in the church. And then you had, I think the true death of the shock jock was probably Janet Jackson's tit in the Super Bowl. That was probably the end. Yeah, because then broadcasting changed all the fine structures and the FCC kind of clamped down after that. And that was it. And so they went to music and they could make money doing music. And you'd have your news guys, and your old news guys would do news, and that would make you enough money. Well, then the whole thing just got fractured. Podcasts started becoming a little more profitable. And even though more people listen to the radio than listen to podcasts nowadays, that number has been, the gap's been narrowing over time. I think now it's 60% of people listen to a podcast at least once a week, 90% radio. It used to be 98-20.
Well, radio always used to be originally too you had to catch it when it was there or when it was a rerun. It was like a live TV deal. Now everybody with podcasts especially, and even with radio shows, because most radio shows simulcast, so you can just check it out when you want to. So it makes it more of a you get the content you want on your time.
Well, and there's people who've only done podcasts. They're a little jealous and bitter, and they don't like to admit this, but there's a certain prestige that comes with being on radio or being on television because it's a professional company recognizing talent and putting that talent on and saying, we're going to spend money to do this. You got to remember, even us, all these podcasts, nobody's backing them with money. I mean, you got to get it straight from the fans. Nobody finds you worthy of being backed financially. And that's
the bar to access is remarkably low here.
Right. You just got to flip a switch.
I rolled over it.
Yeah, you just got to flip a switch and see if people will throw a couple bucks at you, which, by the way, thank you, Mussolini Diff, for $2. Says you guys both have a face that does well for radio. You ain't kidding. You ain't kidding.
That's not a compliment.
Yeah, so no, it was great, and Anthony belongs on the radio, and he was so natural and so conversational, and it was so good, and it was so nice to see him away from the sludge that is podcasting, and it really does separate the men from the boys as to who can do this. Rusty Grammar in the chat saying it's your turn next, literally just waiting for one of these old guys to take their claws out of the rock and just let go. And then once they're gone, we're next. And I'm excited about it. I'm pumped about it. And, we've got a lot of ideas. But hearing Anthony on WABC was, it was awesome. It was great. And like I said, he just belongs there. And hopefully he can build something out of it. Hopefully they put him on drive time in New York. I don't know what you have to do. Well, I do know what you have to do, but we got to get all these AM signals, FM signals, because AM really does limit you in terms of your reach. And with music, like I said, music stations cannot be drawing dollars anymore. They can't be. There's no way. Who's like...
Not when your phone can pair with your car and we all have our music on our phone.
If you look at 7 years ago and you take a look at ratings 7 to 10 years ago, and you see who's on top. It was all top 40, top 40, top 40, top 40, top 40, all the big pop stations. You look now, those are all middle of the pack, and it's hot AC, classic rock, news talk, oldies. That's all it is. It's older people checking it out, and sports talk especially. That's what people want. They want personalities. We're in the day and age of the hot take. And if you have a hot take, that's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear a hot track. They want to hear a hot take. So awesome to hear Anthony back on regular radio again. Hopefully something big comes of it. It's just, his exile lasted, 10 years from radio, but from terrestrial radio, I think 15 years. It was I think in 2009, O&A was taken off of K-Rock in New York. So a 15-year break from terrestrial radio. Ours has only been 4. And for the last year and a half, we've been talking to people about coming back. So,
hopefully soon.
Like I said, you see me giddy today. I'm happy for Anthony. He's one of my biggest influences. I'm really happy for him. But it also means really good things for this show, so I'm not going to pretend it's not. A lot, believe me, I talked to the radio people. A lot of radio people were listening to Anthony's return to regular radio because it could be the start of bringing all those old shock jock war horses back because, like I said, radio has very few stars anymore.
I got to wonder, how excited was Bubba for all this? Because he's still on the radio, right?
I can never tell. Every time I think he is, people say no.
He's on stuff and he's not. He gets canceled from shit. I can't tell which things he's on.
I think he's still on some stations. I thought he had something called Florida Man Radio or something like that. I could be wrong. But like you said, who can keep track anymore? But I know Bubba interviewed Anthony, and it went really well, and Bubba was excited. And, yeah, Bubba's watching it the same way we are. In the state of Minnesota, nobody had the shares that we did when we were on. And
no, nobody.
The numbers were insane. So, when Minnesota needs somebody, we're going to be... This is the conversation. What do you think about the fucking steel toe guy? And then 90% of them go, Jesus Christ, a little too hot right now. And then the other 10% go, boy, it sure would draw a crowd, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they're looking for. So it's, again, great, awesome. I listened to about 15, 20 minutes of it. Seemed good. Seemed like a good radio show. And that's something radio desperately needs. They need to get him out of that time slot, though, because I think it's Bulliva's Sunday Sinatra beforehand. Mm-hmm. And after him is like the Animal Well-Being Hour or something like that. It's not like you're looking to put on bang-up programming at 10 p.m. on a Sunday, but he's deserving of more than that time slot.
Maybe they thought they had to like wean him in or something. Like if he came in too hot or something, like because he's used to the internet where he could just be like, I'm sick of all these. Like, whoa, buddy, remember we've got rules here.
He did say he goes that I do need to prove I can behave, and I know. Whenever I come back, I'm gonna have to be on the same. I'll be on the same leash. And it's deserved. I mean, what are you gonna do? Tell him no? You're not in a position to tell him no. They say behave.
They brought me back and they put me in fucking training wheels.
Yeah, I mean, why? Why, when we come back, are they going to have to put me on training wheels? Because I fucked up. And you got to prove you can behave. I mean, it's not like the last year has done very well for the I promise Aaron can behave thing.
Why? What happened?
There was an outside chance in 2024, at the beginning of 2024. Let's just say there was a company whose mentioned start date was January 1st, 2025. Mm-hmm. And let's just say that got pushed back a little bit for not just for what happened in the last year, but also staffing and, nobody moved and, there's a plan and that plan didn't come to fruition. But yeah, the last year didn't exactly make people go, oh yeah, this guy's judgment has changed. This guy knows, where his bread is buttered and what's good and what's bad. He gets it. Not exactly.
He's a people person.
You can't exactly, when people are looking at you in that way, you can't exactly point to three other people and go, hey, they're way bigger pieces of shit than I am. Because they go, yeah, I know. I'm not looking at them. You're a piece of shit. Not as bad as them. It's like, yeah, and I wouldn't bring them aboard either. That's Mussolini Dip with $5 says, Aaron, you don't want to do radio only. I mean, you'll miss the daily affirmation of being called fat and gay. You don't remember the radio days? I got plenty of fat and gay back then too.